I have these things sitting up here, and I probably missed on my notes where I was going to tell you about this, but I keep this on my desk at my office, and this reminds me of what I looked like when I was 40 years old. It's so funny. When I was 40 years old, I had as much of God as anybody could have. That's the water. I had him up to the top. But life didn't work very good, and I couldn't figure out why. And nobody knew how to tell me about the stupid rocks. And the rocks are self-protecting games that I learned how to play when I was a kid to survive molestation and domestic violence and rejection and all the things that I survived. They also represent lies that I believed about God, lies that I believed about myself and other people, and lies that I believed about how the world is supposed to work. So what I've watched God do is that through this process is that he'll reach in and pull up a rock from time to time. He did it just this morning. He did it just this morning. And he says, let's look at this. And then through these tools, we process it. And that rock is taken away. It's gone. And guess what? There's more room for him. And life works better. Now, when my sister said to me that one day, that nothing bad has ever happened to you in your life, Sheila, I realized what she was talking about is that she doesn't smell any unforgiveness, dead carcasses. Because I have this picture in my mind of, I've never seen the movie Walking Dead, but I've seen some commercials for it where like I'm dragging some Walking Dead with me. I bet they stink. I think the Walking Dead stink. And so what my sister was saying is that because I've processed those things, she doesn't see or experience any of that in me. No bitterness, no resentment, no unforgiveness, a lot of joy, a lot of peace for the most part. I deal with stuff in my life, but I easily go back to fix your thoughts and spend most of my time. Life is like railroad tracks. This is, I think Rick Warren said it in his book, Purpose-Driven Life. And life is like railroad tracks. There's always bad and good happening at the same time. I'm getting a lot of feedback. Okay, there's always good and bad at the same time. I have to deal with the bad. I have to process that. I'm not going to pretend like it doesn't exist. But when I've done that, then I'm going to fix my thoughts. I'm going to spend my life over here. Fruit of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, patience, gentleness, kindness, faithfulness, self-control. So what my sister was telling me is that she didn't smell anything. She doesn't see the grim face and the, all that. But what the Lord showed me is that when you give this stuff to me, when you send it over to me, everything with God is an exchange. He says, don't worry about anything. Pray about everything. Tell me what you need. Thank me for what I've done. And in exchange, I'll give you the peace that passes all understanding, that guards your heart and mind in Christ Jesus. So when I'm willing to send this stuff over to him, what I get in return, something beautiful. So this is on my desk also. Every single one of these represent a broken place that God has healed, and he's turned it into something that's beautiful that I can offer to you. See? There's hope. There's life after the brokenness. He wants to heal your heart. He wants to give you a better quality of life. One of my favorite verses is John 10:10. And Jesus is talking, and I know he is because it's written in red in my Bible. The enemy comes to steal, kill, and destroy. But I came to give you a rich and satisfying life. I like that translation. So when David processed about his dad, one of the things we talked about, did God come to steal, kill, and destroy? No. But somebody did. Let's put it in the right circle. Satan has a circle too, doesn't he? I should get a big black hula hoop. Never thought about that before. But when you give something over to the Father, he never gives it back to you the same way. It's completely transformed. And when you are working through this stuff, it's your training. It's the reason I do what I do. It's not just the certificates on the wall. You guys are listening to me because my voice has weight. Because I use these tools and they work. And I am not going to walk in denial. And if something is not working, I am going to dig deep and let the Lord show me why. And if I can't figure it out, I'm going to go to a mechanic. And I happen to know some really good mechanics. Emotional mechanics. And that's what you have to do too. When I grew up in the church, going to a counselor, what do you need a counselor for? You have God. Oh, wait a minute. I'm pretty sure it's biblical. He says that there's safety in a multitude of counselors. We're supposed to be confessing our sins to one another and praying for one another that we may be healed. We're supposed to be bearing one another's crushing overload. What do you think that is? How are you going to do that if you don't talk to somebody? We can't read minds. The last time I checked, only one person can do that, and his name is G-O-D. Even Satan can't read your mind. I hope you know that. Even Satan can't read your mind, and no one else can either. Okay, this is the handout for the third session, why we do what we do. Behaviors or responses are not just a result of an event. The perception is that an event happens, and then we react to it. Oh, here it is. Okay. I will tell you, Dr. Lynch does this a little different than I do. Different doesn't mean wrong. It just means different, right? Right? Okay. So I draw 3 boxes. We have an event that happens in our life. For some reason, that didn't look right. I do know how to spell. I have a whole bunch of notes, but because of time, I'm just going to teach you what I know instead of looking at my notes, if that's okay with you. Okay? So, let me make sure I'm okay with that. This is the part that says God has designed a flight recorder called the heart, and all of life events, thoughts, emotions are recorded there. So this is like when you're a little kid and you're giving things an interpretation. Things are happening all throughout our life, and we have like a little flight recorder, and I think it's here. The but I feels, we record events and we give it an interpretation. And then we operate out of that interpretation. We don't actually remember the event. We remember how the event made us feel. And then every time we tell it, it changes a little bit with every telling of it. So even when I tell you stories about my childhood, I'll be perfectly honest with you, it's how I remember it. It may not have happened exactly that way, but it is how I remember it. And my family will tell you probably something different. And there have been times, it's not like this anymore, that they wished that I would shut up. Because it was almost like nobody grew up in domestic violence but me. And so if I just be quiet, then the family could be okay. They might be, but I wouldn't. There's actually a book that we have at the office. It's called Adult Children. And it has some, the first time Chuck Lynch gave me that book back in the early 90s, it took me 2 years. It was so painful for me to look at how broken my family was. Even though you think you grew up in domestic violence, you knew that, but there was still a part of me that didn't. There was a part of me that it was my normal. And I didn't completely understand the harm that it had done to my heart. I didn't get it. But we have an event that happens in our life, and then we have a response. So, does this ever happen to you? You have an event, and then you have a response that's out of proportion to the event. Does that ever happen? It's called a trigger, right? Is this response about what just happened? No, because you go from the event through a core belief to the response. And where do you think those come from? Right there. That's where they come from. That's why this work is so important. Because from this work, we will be able to discover what these things are. And these are the things that are running our life, more than the truth that we know. This is what runs my life. Now, I've learned something, is that, and we talked about it, because there's different ways. There are exploders. That would be me. I tended to be that. And then there are imploders, and it looks like this. They probably are not going to scream at you. They could shut down. I see that a lot. They shut down. They'll become passive aggressive, but there'll be something that they're feeling in here. And so I'm going to give you an example because I think that always helps, right? Okay. One time, I was probably in my 50s, or maybe just 50. We live out in the country, and we have a 2-car garage that my car never gets to be in. We also have a big old barn. My husband loves to collect stuff, and he has big garage sales. Anyway, so when the winter comes, I came home from work. I get home from work late sometimes, and I came home from work late, and the next day, or that night, there was going to be an ice storm. So when I got home, my husband had put a big tarp over his truck with bricks and stuff so that when he got up the next morning, he could just pull the tarp off and he wouldn't have to scrape the ice. And so I get home, he's already in his PJs, he's already in his slippers, it's already getting cold outside, and I see what he's done, and I come in and I said, honey, that's a great idea. Would you put a tarp on my car? Well, he didn't want to. His body language made that perfectly clear. But he did it anyway, shuffled out, and put the tarp on my car. The next morning, he goes to work before I do, and he calls me from work, and he says, hey, you're going to have to go out and start your car because the tarp blew off. And I said, did the tarp blow off of your truck? And he said, no. And I got quiet, and he said, okay. And I said, it's a lot of things. But okay is not one of them. Click. And I hung up. I'm telling you what, I was like a fire-breathing dragon. I was so mad. I didn't act out, but I was mad. But I understood about this tool, and I knew that my response was out of proportion to what had just happened. So I stopped, like I told you earlier, and I said, Lord, what's going on under that response? That was the question that I asked. And 3 things came to my mind. I'm not important. No one's going to take care of me. I need to figure out how to take care of myself. Now, if I didn't understand that I was in a trigger, doesn't that sound true about that event? Doesn't it? So then it would be about him, right? But because I knew that this response was out of proportion, I knew it wasn't about him. But it could have been. If I didn't know, that's how fights start. Now, I'm going to tell you something. When I got triggered and I said, it's a lot of things, but okay's not one of them. Click. Guess what happened to him? He got triggered. And his trigger was, inadequate, can't get it right, can never please. So if I hadn't known what this was when he came home, can you imagine what was going to happen? Yeah. How many of your fights in your marriages are because you're being triggered? And you think it's because of this when it's really about this. Oh my goodness. Is that going to change everything? So I'm going to tell you what to do about it. So this is what I did. I said, Lord, what am I feeling right now underneath this extreme response? And those three things popped up. I'm not important. No one's going to take care of me. I have to take care of myself. My next question was, Lord, where did that come from? Oh. The first time. And so when I prayed, because this is prayer, I'm talking to the Lord, and I said, where did that come, those three things, where did they come from the first time? He took me back. I mean, in my mind, I saw a memory of a time when I was really little. I was under 5, I'm sure, and I was molested. And it was my great uncle. He lived on a little house in the backyard of my grandma's house. This is in the 1950s. And there was no air conditioning. Okay, so I don't want to get ahead of myself. So he took me back to this memory of a time when I'd been molested. But when I looked at that memory, I didn't feel any pain because I had processed that. I had forgiven that man, and I had understood. So I was a little surprised by this. But it's almost like the Lord, and he'll do this sometimes. I've gone back to the same place multiple times, but he shows me something different. And so it's like he panned the camera back, and this time, instead of seeing myself sitting in the chair on that old guy's lap and smelling the alcohol and feeling the whiskers on my face, instead of that, this time he panned back, and I saw my grandma's house across the yard. And at my grandma's house, there's this big screened-in back porch, and my family is all over there. And I can see the lights, and they're all moving around in that house. And I believe that the enemy was standing right there beside that chair. And he pointed that out to me. Look over there. You must not be very important to them. If you were important to them, somebody would come over here and get you out of this. I guess you're going to have to figure out how to take care of yourself. And for the next 50 years, I lived out of that core belief lie that I'm not important, no one's going to take care of me, I have to take care of myself. And I had said multiple times through the years of my marriage to my husband, I said to him, I can't trust you to take care of me. I'll figure out how to do it myself. I won't even ask him. I can't trust him to take care of me. That was not an adult woman to an adult man. That was a little girl who had a core belief lie that I'm not important, no one's going to take care of me, I have to take care of myself. So I said, absolutely. That feels so true in this moment. That is exactly what I've done. I have several ways of saying this. I don't like to add too many things because I don't want to make it confusing. But what I believe happened is the enemy stated some things, and I agreed with him because they felt true. There's the but I feels. I agreed with him because it felt true in that moment. Can you imagine how terrified that little girl was? And to think that she wasn't important enough for somebody to come and get her out of that? They didn't know, but when you're little, you don't know. That's the interpretation that it was given. So I said, yes, this is how I felt in that moment. This is the agreement that I made with the enemy. Lord, I want to break those agreements, and I want to make new agreements. So Jesus, where are you? He was right there. He picked me up off of that old guy's lap. Now, I know you didn't find this funny. I'm 5'2". I've been 5'2" since I was in the 5th grade. I was freakishly tall for my age. And then I stopped growing. So I have a picture of Jesus picking me up and my arms and legs just being these like long gangly things and just wrapping myself around him. And he said to me, Sheila, you're important to me. I'm going to take care of you. You do not have to take care of yourself. And I have never been triggered in that again. And I am 68 years old. I have never been triggered in that again. Now, I will tell you that the enemy has tried to take back the ground that he lost that day. Mike and I got into a disagreement several years ago, and I'm driving to pick up my granddaughter, and I hear in my head, you're not important. If you were important, blah, blah, blah. And I went, I don't think so. That is not going to work on me. You are not getting that ground back. Because the truth is, my husband and I have just had a disagreement, and we will talk it out, and it will be just fine, because I am important to him. He does a really good job of taking care of me. I do not have to figure everything out myself. And it was gone just like that. So be aware, the enemy is always going to try and take back ground that he's lost. Always. And we just have to be aware that that's what he's doing, and it doesn't have to work. So when in that case, I didn't have anybody that I needed to forgive. I didn't have anything that I needed to process. I'd already forgiven the guy who molested me. My parents didn't really know about it. It was just a matter of recognizing I had made an agreement at that time and breaking it and making a new agreement. Because I think we make contracts with the enemy. That's what he tries to get us to do. That's why he wants to engage us in conversation. It kind of reminds me of the stuff that's been going on in the news. If anybody went in to talk to Mueller, pretty soon they're going to have something that they've done that's wrong, because he's going to trick him into agreeing with him about something. It's kind of that same thing. That's what Satan does. I'm not saying Mueller is Satan. I'm just saying it's the whole idea, is that you'll agree with something, and then that's how you live, out of that agreement. And so in your relationship with the people who are closest to you, you'll begin to recognize. So if Michael gets triggered by something, or I get triggered by something, guess what? Our triggers belong in our circle. This trigger that I had was mine. I could have said, well, if you'd have just taken better care of me, then I wouldn't have acted like that. Nope. My trigger belongs to me. It's my responsibility to own that and take that to the Lord and let him show me. It has nothing to do with my husband. Nothing. When he committed adultery, the truth is that was his woundedness that he brought into the relationship. Could I have been a better wife? Probably. We can all be better. But what I was doing wasn't why he did what he did. He did what he did out of his brokenness, and he brought that into the marriage. I did a lot of the things that I did out of my brokenness. So when he came home that night, honestly, I was still kind of irritated. I was in second gear. But I had a response that was in proportion to what had happened. And now we can have an adult-to-adult conversation instead of a little girl to a grown man. We're going to have an adult-to-adult conversation, because I can still be upset, angry about something, but I just am not in that trigger anymore. And so we had a good conversation about it, and we talked about it, and I talked to him about what I'd learned about myself. He knows I'm a processor, and he's like always learning things about me. Probably just, no, he likes knowing. He likes knowing. As a matter of fact, I'm going to say this to you. When he committed adultery, that was in 1989, and we just celebrated our 49th anniversary this month. Is that amazing or what? Sometimes I tell people about that, and then somebody will come up to me afterwards and say, are you still married to him? And I think, I need to tell people, yeah, we're still married, and we use these tools, and we work through our stuff. And when we went to see Dr. Lynch, and he told me that I was operating in lies, I thought, don't tell him. Cuckoo, cuckoo. Man is nuttier than a fruitcake. How is that even possible? I know the Word of God. I love Jesus with all my heart. It's not possible, but boy, was he right. And that's why I keep that water jug sitting on my desk to remind me how right he was. how right he was. So can you see from each of these three tools, if you began to use them and apply them in your life, how you could work through a lot of your own emotional baggage? Can you see freedom? Can you see it? That it's there. And God wants you to do it. And here's the thing. Don't be discouraged. My husband says to me sometimes, no, Stephanie, my daughter, she'll say, Mom, you and Dad have been married for 49 years. I'd think you'd have it figured out by now. Well, I'm pretty sure that God says until the day of Jesus Christ. And that's how long it's going to take. So I don't get discouraged about it. I just want to keep learning and growing and figuring it out. So we have just a few minutes. I've got two things that I can do. I honestly wanted to teach you a tool about boundaries. I would really like to teach you a tool about boundaries, but I also was hoping that we could walk through the forgiveness stuff. But in your handout, there's an outline of the prayer that I use in my office. So if you come up with a person, then you can follow that outline with someone else, and you can walk through that forgiveness stuff. And if you need help, ask. Please ask. So let me ask you a question. Do you want to walk through the forgiveness prayer, or do you want me to teach you a tool on boundaries? Both? Rob wants it all. Well, Rob, you know where to find me, dude. Okay, this is a and I asked permission of my friend if I could share this, and she said yes. I have a friend here that's come all the way from Tennessee, and she didn't come for this, but it just worked out that she got to be here for this. And stand up, Kristen. I want them to see who you are. My sweet friend. She has been in my life longer than my children. And the reason for that is that her mama was my friend, and she babysat my kids. And she has 9 children of her own. And I have gotten to be adopted grandma to her kiddos. And that one is her last one, and she's getting ready to turn 13. And her oldest one lives in Alaska, and she lived with us for a couple of years, and I call them my adopted grandchildren. And I've spent a lot of time with them. She and I are as different as night and day. We are. She doesn't even know what I'm going to say. I just asked permission if I could share something, and this just happened last Saturday. She drove up from Tennessee, and she goes to stay at her brother's house, and I think he's about an hour from us. It's about an hour for her to get from there to here. She will tell you she's very laid back, and I'm scheduled. You can see the problem already, right? But here's what I'm going to share it with you how it happened, and then I'm going to share with you what God taught me from it, because it was so sweet. I just can't not share it with you. A boundary is a fence that you put around what you value. So the first thing you have to do is identify what do you value. If you don't have something that you value, you're not going to put a fence around it. I always say to moms, do you value your kids? That's real easy. But then I say to the mom, are you even inside of your own fence? Chances are not, because moms don't value themselves very much. But the fence has a gate, and as long as other people value what I value, they get to come inside the fence. That's what friendship looks like. I'm friends with people who value what I value. I'm not friends with people who don't value what I value. Right? I have a little picture. We live in the country. The neighbor built a piece of property, and he put this big white fence with a big electric gate. And one day I thought to myself, he's put a fence around what he values. It's a boundary. And I thought to myself, if I went over there and leaned up against his fence, and he would come out and say, what the heck are you doing? And I would say, oh, I was just admiring everything you've been doing. Every time I have to go into town, I see this, and your landscaping is gorgeous, and your brickwork is beautiful, and your in-ground pool is amazing. And I just would go on and on and on, valuing what he values. It's possible and pretty likely he might even say to me, well, come on in, let me unlock the gate and show you around. And so he starts to show me around. And over a period of time of me valuing what he values, we become really good friends, because that's what friendship is. You're friends with people who value what you value. And he put a fence around what he valued, so I knew what he valued. Sometimes it's not real clear in friendship what we value unless we are careful to state that. And we have a conflict and the other person doesn't even know what it's about. But anyway, I become his friend, and I become such a good friend because I so deeply value what he values that one day he says to me, I'm going to give you a key to the gate. And you come over anytime you want to with your granddaughter and you go swimming in the in-ground pool. Because I have shown that I value what he values. And so I do that. But one day, instead of bringing my granddaughter, I bring my BB gun. And I shoot all the windows out in his house. What do you think he's going to do? He's going to take the key, and he's going to show me to the gate, and he's going to lock me out. Is he being mean? I said I was sorry. He's being unforgiving. That's not very Christ-like. Is that not what we do in the church? Is that not what we do to each other? I showed clearly I did not value what he valued, and yet I expected him to leave that gate open, and I expected him to let me keep coming in there just because I said I was sorry. He has a responsibility to guard what he values. Isn't that what that verse is talking about when it says, guard your heart with all diligence? We have a responsibility. Okay, I could maybe convince him once again that I value what he values. He could let me inside the gate. I bet he'd never give me a key again. Do you think he's being unchristlike? Okay, but I want you to think about it in your relationships. How many times do people want you to give them back the key? They want you to give them back the key. And they say you're self-righteous or you're unforgiving. I don't think that's necessarily true. So I'm going to tell you now about my friend. She's laid back and I'm not. So she texts me and says, can I come? And I said, yes, but I was a little hesitant. And I think she must have sensed it. I haven't talked to her about this. And so she came back and said, if you don't want us to come, it's okay. I said, no, I want you to come. My hesitancy is that in the past you haven't come when you said you would. I've not been clear with my friend about what I value. All she sees is that I schedule. But what she doesn't see is that I value my time. And because I love my life and the people in them, and I adore her and her kids, I want to have time with her. But if I say come at 5, and she knew, I told her, Saturdays I teach on Sundays, so Saturdays I eat light, I go to bed early, we keep it really low key, and so she knew all of those things. I was trying to, without saying it, tell her I value what I value. And so when she said, if you don't want us to come, I said, no, I want you to come. My hesitancy is that sometimes you don't come when you say you're going to. And she came back. She's learned the tools. She did a great job. She said, I am so sorry. Will you please forgive me? I said, no problem. And she said, is there anything else? I said, nope, not holding this against you. And I think I said, it's just a little boundary issue. Right? Did I say something like that? Okay, so she came at 5 o'clock. It was so awesome. It was the best visit we've... Oh, yeah. She said it was 2 or 3 till. Guess what? She caught it. Valuing what I value. But I want you to know the results of this, guys. If you will be bold enough to speak, because I've never done that for her, and I'm sorry about that I haven't made it clear to you. It's not about scheduling. It's about what I value. And because I want to spend time with her. She came at 5. We had 3.5 hours. We laughed, and we talked, and we shared. We sat on the sofa, and she said, "This is like old times." Hello? That's what I thought too. Because if I say you can come at 5 and you don't come till 7 and I still need you to leave at 8, there's not enough time. And then stressed out because I want to enjoy you, but you're not valuing what I value. But I haven't told you what I value. Right? So Mike and I both went to bed that night. There was just like this glow over us. We'd had such a great visit because we were both valuing the same thing. It's not about being laid back or being scheduled. It's about understanding what we value. And so the next day, I'm sitting at my desk, and I'm having my time with the Lord, and he, for some reason, directed me to Exodus 20. Well, you know what's in Exodus 20? The 10 Commandments. Guess what? God put a fence around what he values. He clearly is telling you 10 things that he values. And if you value what he values, there's a gate in the fence. And he is inviting you in to have intimate fellowship with him. But if you don't value what he values, you are making a choice to be outside the fence. And he will regretfully honor the choice that you're making. But the sweetness of that and what I saw in that is, guess what the first thing is on the top of the list of the things that he values? Himself. I don't want you having any other gods but me. He values his name. He values fidelity. He values contentment because he says, I don't want you coveting after anything. I'm going to provide for you. Look at that list of 10 things and you'll know exactly what God values. And if you value what he values, the fellowship there's just nothing like it. The sweetness that I had with him that day because of what he showed me, if I was willing to say to my friend, this is what I value. Do you love me enough to value what I value? And she said, yes, even 2 or 3 minutes more than you want. Look at me. How much I value you. I'm going to give you an extra 2 or 3 minutes. But it changed everything. The atmosphere of my home was different because I didn't feel squashed. I felt like I could go ahead and give it to her, fully engage with her, fully give it to her, didn't even have a thought about it. And then when 8 or so came along, she said, we need to get going again. Valuing what I value. And our friendship is deeper and strengthened. And my friendship and my intimacy with God is strengthened and deepened when I value what he values. He values his word. He values relationships. He values people. So a boundary is a fence that you put around what you value. And as long as other people value what you value, you have the freedom to let them inside that fence. But if they make a decision to not value what you value, they are making a decision to be outside the fence. And I have had to say, I regretfully honor that decision that you've made. And I do mean regretfully. Because I cannot be friends with someone and they cannot be friends with me if we don't value the same thing. When you walk into a place, isn't there something about your spirit that connects to the spirit of another believer? And you don't even have to know it? It's because we value the same thing. Isn't that part of it? Okay. I'm going to let you have the mic for a minute and see if you have any questions or what are you taking away? Is there something that you need clarification for? We're about 10 minutes after 12. You won't hurt my feelings if you have to get up and leave. Does anybody have something? Over here, Lisa.
Oh, boy. Hello? Can you guys hear me? Okay, so my question was...
It's not on.
Can you hear me?
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
Okay, my question is about children when it comes to boundaries. And the thing is, we can't expect them to value like we do expect our friends. And so I'm just wondering what you have to say about that, about setting boundaries about our specific values with children because they're learning.
Are you talking about adult children?
No.
Little children. Okay.
Youngsters.
Okay, well, that's part of your job, to train them. That's part of your job. When Dason, my granddaughter, she's taken to growling a little bit. When she doesn't like something, she'll go, "Arr!" And I said to her the other day, I said, Dason, does Mimi growl at you? And she said, no. I said, then it's not okay for you to growl at me. And so my son-in-law, Rusty, who's here today, said to me, he wants her to stop doing this. And how do we get her to stop doing this? I said, first of all, we set an example of how we want her to behave. If we don't want her to growl, then we better not be growling. Right? So that when she growls, I can say to her, honey, do I growl at you? No. Then it's really not okay for you to growl at me. Our grandsons would come and stay with us in the summer, and that was one of the things that I would do. I treated them with respect. I talked to them in a caring way, and if they were unkind to me, I would say, do I talk to you like that? Then I don't want you to talk to me like that. So you're training them. Okay?
So that brings me to ask, what does an appropriate consequence look like whenever someone violates your boundary?
Okay, that's a really good question, and I usually say that. Actually, a boundary is not a boundary if there isn't a consequence. Thank you. You knew that. A boundary isn't a boundary unless there's a consequence. And then I decide what that consequence is going to look like. I decide. And I can inform them. I can't make somebody, remember, in my circle, I can't make somebody else do something. But I can tell them what they can expect from me should they make the decision to do that. So, just an example, when that happened between my husband and me, clearly I value fidelity. And so if you value what I value, we're going to be able to work through this and stay married. But if you don't value what I value, then we're not going to work through this, and the result is going to be that we're going to not be married. You'll have to find someplace else to live. And so how it sounded is I said, you have some decisions to make. And he did, thank God. You know, we worked through it. But, you know, we have to, when we put a fence around something, we have to be willing to decide, what am I willing to do? And I'm going to make a big caution to you, don't say it if you're not going to do it. Our youngest son, years ago, was addicted to alcohol, and we told him, when you're ready to get help, if you ask, we'll help. And so he came to us and he said, I'm ready to get help. So the boundary was, there will be no drinking. And that didn't mean just in our home. If you're ready to get help, then that means no drinking. And so the understanding was, if you make a decision to drink, you're making a decision to no longer live here. That's just it, that's the way it's going to be. Does that make sense to you? And so at some point, he moved out. We didn't even have a conversation about it. I guess he made a decision he wanted to drink more than he wanted to live there. And I'll have parents say to me, but I can't kick my kids out. I said, I don't want to kick my kids out either, but they can make a decision to no longer live here. They can. And I will regretfully honor the decision that they've made. Okay.
So when you talk about forgiveness and then the boundary issues, so in my instance, one of my big things is with my mother. I grew up in an abusive home as well. My mother doesn't acknowledge her piece in that, her role. and she says a lot of things that are very hurtful, and she doesn't even realize that she says them and does some of those things. So when there's been forgiveness, if we've chosen not to be a part of being with them, then it's that we just didn't forgive right. So what I'm hearing you saying is that you can forgive those hurts, but that boundary, the boundaries you're talking about, doesn't mean that we have to continue to subject ourselves to things like that.
That's true.
Okay.
That's true. There's a book that's written, I think it's called Bold Love by Dan Allender, and it has 3 different kinds of people that you love. You love an ordinary sinner, you love a fool, you love an evil person. And in there, and it's been a while, but in there's a description of what you're talking about. If a bank loans me money and I default on the loan, the bank can forgive me that debt, but it's not going to loan me new money. Does that make sense? What would I have to do for the bank to loan me new money? Repay the debt. Restitution. Remember, there's no real, I can forgive that person. What that does is free my heart to have an intimate relationship with the Father. My heart can be okay because I forgave them. The relationship is not okay. The relationship will only be okay when there's repentance. Right? Okay. The relationship will only be repaired when there's repentance, and then there is work at restoration. My forgiveness opens the opportunity, but whether they take that opportunity or not is not in my circle. And so I get it. They shame us. Well, you're self-righteous, you're unforgiving, you've got a root of bitterness. I've heard it all. And I have to keep entrusting myself back to the one that judges rightly. I will be honest with you. I'm a beam checker. Do you know what that means? God says, check the beam in your own eye first. And I'm a really good beam checker. And so if somebody says something, I'll be more than happy to check the beam. I'll even go to somebody else and I'll process through and see if maybe I'm missing something, because we all have blind spots. But if there's nothing, then I'm going to make sure that I just entrust it back to the one who judges rightly and keep fulfilling what's in my circle of responsibility. And this new hurt of them calling me names and saying ugly things about me, I'm going to pull out the file and I'm going to say, Lord, they did some things today that hurt me. Because the scripture says, don't let the sun go down on your wrath. Don't let the devil get a mighty foothold. That's the file. To me, that's what this tool is. This is me not letting the sun go down on my wrath. If somebody did something today, if somebody dumped hurt into my circle today, I'm going to process it before the sun goes down, because I'm not going to give the devil a foothold. So somebody can dump hurt into my circle. It doesn't belong to me. They're not willing to take it back. It doesn't belong to me. Send it away. Does that make sense? Just different ways of the same thing. But I think for me, I need all of those different ways, because one of them will click with you better than another one. Anybody else?
My question is, if you are hurt, if you're angry and hurt by what someone has done to you, and you're trying really hard to forgive them and let go of the anger and the hurt, but what if they've never explained why they did it, never apologized, and in fact, they're still doing it? How do you let go? I mean, I can let go of the anger, because I'm not a person who stays angry. But I can't let go of the hurt when they just keep on doing it. How do you send that away?
Well, every time they do something to me, I'm going to put it in the file. Because remember, if I forgave them for the things they've done in the past, and they've hurt me again today, this is today's stuff. And today's stuff I'm going to put in the file. But I'm going to ask you a question. If somebody hit you with their car, would you keep standing in the middle of the road? and let them keep hitting you with their car. No, you're going to get out of the way of the car. You're not going to let them keep hitting you. And so I will remove myself from a place where someone is continuing to do that. Because if they're not owning what they're doing, how silly am I? That means I'm not putting a fence around what I value, which is me. Does that help?
Sheila. Sheila.
Dory.
You know some of my hurts. I've had some big wounds, and one of them, of course, came to surface as we're talking about forgiveness. And, you know, it's been almost 40 years since my dad and my stepmom were crushed and the Hyatt Regency collapsed.
Yeah.
And so I have helped since then, more recently the last 30 years, women with hurts. I help in the abortion post-wounded area. But how can you, I do forgive the construction workers that were inept that day and so on. But when it comes back up again and I have to pull out the file, it's just that I'm so wounded before that. You know, I had an abusive husband and that knocked me silly for a few years and so on. You know, now I have to strap it on. And I recently gave myself whiplash coming out of a hot tub. And, you know, I'm in a poor way today, but emotionally I'm stronger than I've ever been. And the Lord has healed me so very much. But I'm shaken, and I'm like, okay, God, here we go again. Pull out the Hyatt file. And, you know, I want to be done with it. I want to be so done with it.
Okay. Well, there's nothing new to forgive. Is that what I'm hearing you say? So what you really are is experiencing the grief over your loss. And so you might want to use the talk to the hand tool. You might want to just say, you know what, Satan, I've been down that road. I've been down that road. It's our job to forgive. It's God's job to heal. Are you telling me that God's not healing that wound? Is he healing the wound? Okay. Then it's a big loss. And we get to grieve our losses, and so sometimes I still grieve. Sometimes I've been known to even still cry over adultery. But I won't stay there. You don't either, Dory. We don't live there, right? Okay. It's just a reminder that, yeah, I still have some grief over those things. And isn't it exciting to know that someday, Lord, even that's going to be gone? Even that's going to be gone. He's the God who heals. And we may not get all of our healing on this planet. Okay, is that it?
Sheila, I just wanted to let you know, to probably expand a little bit about it. That fence that we talk about boundary, because based on what I have heard, is a fence is not always a 3-inch fence. I mean, because whatever you value, like if you have a dog, the neighbor dog poops in your yard, and you build a 3-inch fence, that dog is not going to be, I mean, he's going to be still going back and forth, pooping into your yard. So you got to build based on how much you value what is in your terrain, and also based on the magnitude of the offense, you build an appropriate fence based on that. The value of your property.
Very good observation. Very good observation. So not all fences are exactly the same, are they? Okay, guys. Rob? Okay.
That was a really good illustration on the events with the cars.
Yes?
Now, to be a person that thinks to minimize your own story.
He goes to work 5 hours before I do. I think it's a moot point, bud. You know what he actually did do? He put an automatic start on my car. Never have the issue again. Thanks, guys. Father, thank you for this time, and I know that you're the Holy Spirit, and you just dwell in them and continue the work. In Jesus' name. Thanks, guys.